Hi, this is the SAT No Calculator section by High School Math Analyzers. So, for question 1, a painter will paint n walls with the same size and shape in a building using a specific brand of paint. The painter's fee can be calculated by the expression NKLH, where n is the number of walls, k is a constant with units of dollars per square foot, L is the length of each wall in feet, and h is the height of each wall in feet. If the customer asks the painter to use a more expensive brand of paint, which of the factors in the expression would change? Okay, so let's take a look at each answer choice and determine whether they're right or wrong and why. So first for A, choice A, the height of each wall in feet will not be affected by a more expensive brand of paint. Why? Because that's just the length of measurement. It's a unit, it's the length of the wall. If I use a more expensive type of paint, the height of the wall is not gonna, get longer or shorter. So that's not gonna be affected. For choice B, the length is not going to be affected either for the same reason as the height. For choice C, K, which is the constant with units of dollars per square foot, will actually vary depending on the type of paint used. So a more expensive paint will cost more per square foot. So that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at D, which is N. And the number of walls, there's not going to be more or less number of walls if the paint becomes more expensive. So choice D is incorrect. Therefore, choice C is correct, as the painter's fee in the expression would change. Question 2. If 3r equals 18, what is the value of 6r plus 3? Now, once again, just with all these questions, try to do them on your own before the explanations. So the first thing we'll do is try to isolate and solve for r. And we divide by 3 on both sides, and we find that r equals 6. And what we want to do is we want to plug that 6, which is what r equals to, back into that equation 6r equals 3. So substituting 6 in for r, we get that 6 times 6 is 36, plus 3 is 39. Therefore, choice D is correct. Question 3. Which of the following is equal to a to the 2/3 power for all values of a? So, looking at that diagram above, a to the m over n power equals the square root of a to the m power, which n here is the same as the denominator in that fraction, m over n, and it's also considered the index when it's in that square root format. And for m, it's a numerator, and it's increasing the radicand by a certain power. The radicand in this case is a. So what we want to do is we want to substitute those numbers back in and see what we get. So if we put 3 into the expression on the right of the equal sign, we find that 3 would equal n, and that 2 would equal m. And we want to see which of the following answer choices that would end up matching up with. Now taking a look, the only thing that matches is D, because it's the only one that matches up perfectly, and it's exactly correlates from the fractional expression of 2/3 to square root of the cube root of a cubed. So it correlates. Therefore, choice D is the correct answer. Question 4. The number of states that joined the United States between 1776 and 1849 is twice the number of states that joined between 1850 and 1900. If 30 states joined the United States between 1776 and 1849, and X states joined between 1850 and 1900, which of the following equations is true? So, let's see what we know. Well, the 30 states must be twice as large as X, because we know that the number of states between 1776 and 1849 is double that of 1850 and 1900. Therefore, 2x equals 30 equals correct, because basically x, the x value, represents the number of states that joined between 1776 and 1849. If x states is the number of states that joined between 1850 and 1900, we know that that's half as much. Therefore, we would need double the number of states to equal that from 1776 to 1849. And the number of states joined was 30, so therefore 2x equals 30 will allow us to go from that 15 which is the number of states, x equals 15, which is the number of states that joined between 1850 and 1900, and when we multiply that by 2, we get 30. Therefore, the answer choice is B. B is correct. Question 5. If 5 over x equals 15 over x plus 20, what is the value of x over 5? So, one thing we should do is cross multiply. Actually, that is the first thing we should do. So, basically, after we do that, we find that 5 times, in parentheses, x plus 20 equals 15x. And simplifying that, which is our next step, we find that when we divide up on both sides by 5, we get that x plus 20 equals 3x. Then, once we subtract x on both sides, we find that 20 equals 2x. And then finally, dividing by 2 on both sides, we find that x equals 10. So now that we know that x equals 10, we want to substitute that into the expression of x over 5. So we know that x equals 10, and we're going to plug in x, that our x value, which is 10, into x over 5. So we get 10 over 5, which is 2, which matches up with choice C, which is in fact correct. Question 6. 2x minus 3y equals negative 14. 3x minus 2y equals negative 6. If x comma y is a solution to the system of equations above, what is the value of x minus y? So, the first thing we're going to do in this case when we go about solving the system of equations is we're going to try to have a common coefficient corresponding to either the x or y value. So, for this case, we're going to focus on x, and we see that there's that 2 and that 3, which are the coefficients for x. And I know that the GCF would be 6, so between 2 and 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make the coefficients for both 2x and 3x equal to 6 to be able to cancel them out and be able to solve for x and y. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by 3 on both sides so that 2x can become 6x. But remember, for it to become 6x, we have to multiply by 3 on all the parts of the equation. So we're going to do that. And then for the other equation, 3x minus 2y equals negative 6, we're going to multiply by negative 2 on both sides. So once we simplify, we get that 6x minus 9y equals negative 42. Oh, and one clarification. We want the bottom to equal negative 6, so 6 minus 6 can cancel out and be 0. We actually don't want them to both be 6, but we want them to be opposites of each other. So we can subtract them out and get 0. So we can cancel those x variables to make it more easy to solve for y. So for the other equation, we actually end up getting negative 6x plus 4y equals 12. Our next step here is to cancel out that 6x and that minus 6x, which is obviously 0. And after subtracting out everything else, or I guess adding technically, because it's 6x, we're going to be adding here. 6x plus negative 6x, the plus and the minus just become minus. So that ends up being 0. And adding the rest, we end up getting that negative 5y equals negative 30. Now simplifying for y, we get that y equals 6. Now, knowing that y equals 6, we still need to find what x is equal to. And we can do that by plugging in y back into any one of those equations. So, we're going to choose the second equation, or the one at the bottom, 3x minus 2y equals negative 6. And we're going to plug in that y value of 6 back into that equation. So we get 3x minus 2 times 6 equals negative 6. 3x minus 12 equals negative 6. And now we're going to add up 12 to both sides and get 3x equals 6. Dividing by 3 on both sides, we isolate for x and find that x is equal to 2. So, knowing that x equals 2 and that y equals 6, and we need to perform the equation x minus y, we're basically just doing the same thing as 2 minus 6, right? So, we get our answer, which is negative 4, which matches up with choice C. Question 7. The function f is defined by a polynomial. Some values of x and f of x are shown in the table above. Which of the following must be a factor of f of x? So, if x minus b is a factor of f of x, then f of b therefore must equal 0. So, taking a look, f of 4 equals 0, and immediately we have our answer. Because if f of 4 is 0, and x minus 4 is a factor of f of x, that means that we immediately have our answer solely by looking at the chart. So since 4 in x corresponds to the 0 in f of x, and we see that there's that x minus 4 choice in choice C, we find that C is the correct answer choice. Question 8. The line y equals kx plus 4, where k is a constant, is graphed in the xy plane. If the line contains a point C, D, where C is not equal to 0 and D is not equal to 0, what is the slope of the line in terms of C and D? So, what we want to do is we want to plug in a value or a number for the slope, which is k in this case. So for example, we can plug in 5, let's say. Now therefore, if we plugged in 5 for k and substituted that in, we get y equals 5x plus 4. Our second step will be to plug in a number for the x coordinate. So for example, x equals 2. So if we did that, we'd find that 5 times 2, which is 10, plus 4 equals 14. So y equals 14. So now, taking a look, we know that x equals 2 and y equals 14. Because of that, we would know that C equals 2 and D equals 14. Why? Because the points C, D are just different variables used to call x and y. X, y is the same thing as C, D. So it's just trying to trick you a little bit, but those variables are actually the same. They mean the same thing. Next, our third step, we would plug in numbers for the answer choices. So, for example, let's take a look at this one. D minus 4 over C, we find that 14, which is D, minus 4 over 2, gets us 10 over 2, which equals 5. Now, basically because of that, we get our answer choice A. Why? Because once again, we're trying to find the slope of the line in terms of C and D, and if k equals 5 and our resulting answer results in 5 as well, we know that it's correct. Therefore, A is the correct answer choice. Question 9. K times x minus 3y equals 4. 4x minus 5y equals 7. In the system of equations above, k is a constant and x and y are variables. For what value of k will the system of equations have no solution? If a system, now let's just keep something in mind. How do we know if a system of equations have no solution? Well, if a system of linear equations have no solution, we know that the lines represented by the equations in the coordinate plane are parallel because they will never touch, so there's no solution. The solution represents some sort of intersection between the lines. Therefore, if they never intersect and are parallel, there is no solution. So, looking here, we can try to make that k times x minus 3y equals 4. We can rearrange that where y would be alone and isolated on the left side of the equation. And we get that. Next, we would do the same thing for 4x minus 5y equals 7. And of course, we would do this by subtracting out, negative 4x, and then by dividing by negative 5 on both sides to isolate for y. Now, if the two lines are parallel, then the slopes of the line are equal. That's something important to note. Right. Now, that means that the slopes of the line are equal. However, the y-intercepts of the lines would be different. Now, taking a look, 4/5 equals k over 3 in this case. And if that's true, we know that k equals 12 over 5, solving for k. Now, because of that, we get our answer because since we don't know the slope and we're trying to solve for k in this case, when we find what it is, since they're parallel, we know that they don't have any solution, and we already know the slope for the bottom equation, 4x minus 5y equals 7. But once we've solved for k, which is that slope value, and now we are fully sure that they're parallel, since the values of the slopes of the lines are equal, which makes the two lines parallel, since they're not exactly the same equation, but they have those different y-intercepts, which ensures that they never touch. Final question, question 10. In the xy plane, the parabola with equation y equals, in parentheses, x minus 11, close parentheses, squared, intersects the line with the equation y equals 25 at 2 points, A and B. What is the length of AB? So, in order to approach this question, we're going to just keep in mind that y equals 25, and it also equals, in parentheses, x minus 11 squared. So we can basically set 25 equal to x minus 11 squared because they are equivalent as given in the question over here. So that's basically what we're doing. It's called substitution. Let's do it. So we find that, once again, 25 is equal to, in parentheses, x minus 11 squared. And what we want to do is we want to isolate and solve for x. And in order to do that, we want to square root both sides to get rid of that squared on the right side of the squared, because x minus 11 squared on the right side of the equation. And once we do that, we find that plus or minus 5 equals x minus 11. Now, one important thing when square rooting both sides is that once we square root on that 25, we know that the square root of 25 is 5. However, since we're squaring on both sides, it ends up being a plus or minus. So it could be either positive or negative 5. Now, that means we get two answers. Once we add on 11 on both sides, we either get 6 or 16 for x. Now, that's not to worry, because in our next step, we can subtract the 2 and find that 16 minus 6 equals 10, because we're doing plus or minus. And because of that, we end up figuring out that that's why AB is equal to 10. Because since it intersects the equation at 2 points A and B, and we want to find the length of the two, what we're doing is just subtracting the 16 and the 6 from each other. Because, for example, if there's 2 points on the line, and it intersects at those 2 points, and we have to find the distance between them, the distance between them will be the same as subtracting the 2 from each other, so 16 and 6, and that will determine the length of that line, which is the length of AB. So 16 minus 6, and we find that 16 minus 6 equals 10, which is choice A. Now, once again, thank you for watching. This is High School Math Analyzers, and hope to see you practice math more. Thank you.